The door open. I believe that Senator Gossage will find her way here. So we'll start off with any bill introductions. Please come forward. Come forward and identify yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Senator John Dahl, 39th District, and I have a bill RS 0446. It pertains to refugees and getting in-state tuition.
Committee, are there any questions? Can you clarify, is this K through 12 or is this college?
This is post-secondary.
Okay, there we go. Not seeing any questions, so all those in favor say aye. Opposed? We will submit that. Thank you so much. Committee, today we are going to go ahead and get started with vocational technical colleges by the numbers. So we have Jim Ganant, President of the Kansas Vocational Technical Colleges. Jim, it's good to have you with us again today.
Good to see all of you again. You have to put up with me another year. Greetings especially from Manhattan Area Tech College. I'm in my 8th year as president there, and I've been in higher ed way longer than that, and I have the most fun ever at the Tech College. So what I'd like to discuss with you and have a conversation with you about is our performance. You get incredible rapid return on investment from the tech colleges. And I'm going to dive into some of those numbers in a bit. We have been the one sector of public higher education that has survived the pandemic well and grown.
Hang on a second. We're trying to find it. Let's keep the door open because Beverly Gossage, we think Senator Gossage is coming in. So if you'll just speak up.
I'll speak louder.
Okay.
Howdy.
Now go ahead and flip the door. We'll wait for the door to close, and then
We're good.
maybe you could rewind a little bit and start over. The slow doors. Yep.
So my name is Jim Ganant. I'm president of Manhattan Area Tech College, and I represent all the tech college presidents. I've been in higher education as a teacher and administrator for 40 years, so yeah, I'm ancient. But the last 8 at Manhattan Tech have been incredibly fun. And it's not too often people say they have fun at work. I do have a lot of fun, and it's because of our faculty and staff, our community, our outcomes. And I kind of want to talk to you today about the outcomes of the technical colleges. I'm not going to read this verbatim. On page 2, you will see the enrollment chart from last fall from the state regent's office. Of course, enrollment's what everybody looks at. It's a snapshot. These aren't final numbers, but you will see with the tech colleges, we've had good growth. The pandemic did impact us. If you look at Manhattan Tech, you see I've got a couple of negative numbers. That's because during the peak year of the pandemic, I lost over 12% of my enrollment. And yet overall, I've had growth. That's the case with many of the tech colleges. One of the reasons is the fantastic program the state legislature funded many years ago called Excel in CTE, or SB 155. An example of that is my first year at Manhattan Tech in 2015-16, we had a total of 12 Manhattan high school students enrolled in early college classes, 12. Last fall, we had 430. We established our first off-campus center in Wamego, and we've doubled enrollment there in 1 year. Our work with the universities, with the state regent system, with the community colleges pays off in what I call rapid return on investment. Besides Excel and CTE, the good work you pushed through the regents and the universities and colleges over the past many years with the transfer matrix, the guaranteed courses that will transfer in Gen Ed, has paid off well. It's given many more high school students the chance to take early college sooner and transfer those credits to the institutions. On page 3, when we talk about retention, and this is all data from the K-Board data books, you will see that our retention rates are consistently over 60%. For many of our colleges, we consistently range in 55 to 65% retention. Higher education has changed, and the pandemic changed some things related to workforce. As you know, it's the #1 issue. I lose students because they get job offers. All of our programs at the tech colleges have either an internship or clinical requirement. So for instance, I'm one of 2 colleges in the state that teach people how to be electric linemen. My program starts in January, ends in December, 1-year certificate. When they leave the program, they go into a job paying $70,000 to $80,000 a year with 1 year of college. I can't get them to turn that down. I wonder why. In the summer, however, they do an on-the-job experience with a utility company, and many times they're offered a job at that point. And then we have to scramble to work with the company and the student. How do we finish your program? Because I need a completer. Otherwise, I get penalized. That's an example with many of our programs all across the tech colleges because of the workforce issues. Many of our students are getting picked off sooner by employers as soon as they show the skills. Connected to our programs is either an industry credential or a licensure. Okay? So again, let's go healthcare. CNA, one of our big programs, along with the community colleges. And as soon as that student gets that licensure, they've got a job. They go through the nursing program, get the licensure, there's a job. On the other tech side, like for instance, automotive tech, my students can earn up to 8 automotive credentials. Those are the things that talk to employers. Most employers don't want to look at a college transcript in the workforce at our level. They want to see that example, that proof of skills. And that's what we do well. That talks about credentials on the bottom of page 3. Over 50% of our students are getting credentials, and often we've now redesigned things to be stackable. So they start with a CNA. They find out, do I like healthcare at a briefer investment of time and money? Then they go on. They get the LPN, that's a license. They get the RN, that's a license. Then do they go on beyond that for the BSN and beyond? If you look toward the bottom of that paragraph, you'll see some of the age breakdown. Over 50% of our students earning a credential are between the ages of 18 and 24. That speaks, again, the power of Excel and CTE, the engagement we have with employers in the school districts, also our connection with adult ed. We took over the adult ed program from the Manhattan School District about 3.5 years ago. We've graduated over 100 people with a GED in that time. Last week alone, we enrolled 67 people in ESL. Some of those are refugees from Afghanistan, but we're getting more and more return on that investment into adult education. On the next page, you'll see from the perspective of the programs of study that healthcare is far and away our #1 producer of credentialed students and graduates. Again, from CNA, CMA, phlebotomy, nursing programs, EMT, et cetera. That's our real strong connection in all of our communities. But we've seen growth in areas such as construction, mechanics and repair, a new area of emphasis over the last 2 years with many of our institutions is industrial engineering technology. That program on our campus, along with critical environment technology, which is unique to Manhattan Tech because of the biotech industry, and then the biotechnology program we have, those things were key for Scorpion coming to Manhattan. Wichita Tech, similarly, with some of their aerospace manufacturing programs. Graduation rates, we're good at it. 4 Kansas technical colleges were in the top 25 in the nation, according to the Chronicle for the highest graduation rate in the country, Chronicle of Education. North Central Tech, #9, Flint Hills Tech, 10, Salina Tech, 15, Northwest Kansas Technical College at #20. Our collective graduation rates run between 54 and 65%. On the next page, you'll see employment and wages. And again, we shine with this. For most of our students, their first-year earnings are over $40,000 a year. The ones who are less than that are often in early short-term programs such as CNA and EMT, but those are stepstones to the next programs. After 2 years of being in the workforce, their salary numbers on the whole go up by at least 5% and approach a 10 to 12% increase after the 5-year mark. And again, this is off the KBOR Higher Ed Statistics data. Wallet Hub, a national financial services company, does an annual ranking of the best and worst two-year colleges in the country. They look at about 700 colleges each year. Manhattan Tech has been #1 in the state for the last several years, but this year we were #4 in the nation. Their rankings are based on a combination of cost, student outcomes, earnings. Georgetown University, over the last several years, has done a continual return on investment study of American higher education, all colleges and universities. One of their key metrics is called net present value of return of your education over your career. Among the public colleges and universities in Kansas, the tech colleges have 3 representatives in the top 12. Manhattan Tech ranks #1 in the state at 20 years out and #2 in the state and 30 and 40 years out on that metric. We're only surpassed by KU, and that's only because of the med school. So again, our students, while the enrollment numbers overall may not be near like the community colleges, our students are earning that certificate, degree, credential, and going in the Kansas workforce. You see below on that page a chart showing some comparisons between the 3 sectors of public education, higher education in the state. What I want to brag about is that around 98% of our students in the tech colleges are Kansans, and over 80% stay in the state. Again, in my particular case, 86% of my graduates stay in my area. They're the nurses who take care of you in the clinics, the people who repair your cars, the people who keep your power going. You see on that comparison how well we do in terms of enrollment, retention, cost, earnings. We're very appreciative of the funding we get through the legislature. Full funding the formula last year was a big help. The 1-year boost in capital outlay was huge, but we would like more investment. I was asked at the House Higher Ed Budget Committee a few weeks ago, how does all these things affect you with capacity? All of our tech colleges do not have enough capacity to meet the demand in various programs. We would appreciate consideration of more investment because we can turn it around quickly. The total investment of our primary revenue sources of tuition and fees and state appropriations is right around $80 million for the 7 tech colleges. Our annual economic impact is over $400 million. So I think you can see we're pretty good stewards and producers of return on investment. And with that, I would be glad to stand for any questions.
Okay, committee, what questions do we have for Jim? We'll start with Senator Dietrich, and then we will go to Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here. Great report. I just have a quick question about, are there programs that you all have taken a look at across the state, not just your tech college, that I call it selective abandonment, that you've just decided, you know what, we are not getting a return on our investment on this program. So have there been some like that?
Yes, again, it is more at an institutional basis. So I know there's a lot of discussion with the universities about low enrollment programs. We do the same thing. While we're not accountable in that way to the regions, we have to look at it because of our financial situation. We have all terminated programs due to low enrollment and insufficient revenue into the college to maintain that program. At the same time, we're increasingly looking, well, we have for years, but we keep looking at the state labor data. We work with our Perkins partners, with the school districts. What is on the horizon? What's emerging? Our mission is our high wage, high demand, critical need occupations requiring less than a bachelor's degree. Without the taxing authority, and none of us have taxing authority, unlike the community colleges, it's harder for us to start up a program. We don't have the seed money, if you will. In my particular area, I've been asked to put in diesel mechanics, CDL, more cybersecurity, more data analytics. I'm in the middle of a building campaign. We're putting up a new advanced technology building that will expand capacity in construction trades, new program in plumbing, biomanufacturing for Scorpion, more industrial engineering tech. That's an example of how we all work with the industries in our area to identify what do you need to drive the workforce. With that comes the responsibility of looking at existing programs. Is there insufficient enrollment, insufficient revenue?
Thank you.
Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here. This is great. You talked about specifically Manhattan and some of those changes, but can you talk about Flint Hills Technical School, because their head count has grown exponentially? Is it a new program, or exactly what happened there?
I would phrase it as new leadership, and not meaning to knock the former leadership in any way, but some new leadership that increased some engagement with the community and with school districts. I had the same thing at Manhattan. The year before COVID, my enrollment went up 17% in 1 year, but it's that networking and connections that have made the difference.
Thank you. I think that's great because I think so many times this is a great option for students and they just don't have that relationship. So thank you.
Thank you.
Committee, other questions? Talk to us about the proposed merger with the two technical colleges and Fort Hays State University, and how you perceive that affiliation is going to be and what that impact would be on other technical colleges.
It's a good question. I've talked with Ben and Eric, and Steve Kearney, our lobbyist, has worked with them to prepare for this affiliation. And we have talked within the state regions, within the Tech Ed Authority, with community tech colleges about affiliation. Is it beneficial or not? I know in the case of Wichita Tech, Wichita State has been very beneficial. I know it was driven by people in Sedgwick County, by business people. They saw that synergy between the institutions to produce skilled workforce for what they wanted. The situation with with Northwest Kansas Tech, North Central Tech, and Fort Hays is similar and different. They want to affiliate to help drive economic development in the region, but they're also taking a very straightforward look at basic demographics of their area. You do not have a growing population in Northwest Kansas. So they're looking at it, how do they use the benefits of affiliation to combine some services, some costs, to drive more enrollment, to drive more partnership in transfer of the tech college students into the university, and to promote economic development. It makes sense for them, it's their decision. Are the other three tech colleges that have not affiliated looking at affiliation? I can only speak for Manhattan Tech. We're not looking at it right now. I would not say never. In my 8 years there, it hasn't always been easy to work with my big brother down the street called K-State. And their mission's different. They're the land-grant university. I can happily report that over the last 12 months, we've had more conversations about where does it make sense to collaborate, especially with economic development. They produce what they call knowledge-based economic development. I produce skills-based. I'm the workforce side. So we're talking about synergies, partnerships, but I would not say as far as affiliation, that grow those partnerships to produce optimal results. For instance, today I met with their enrollment management team. We're looking at how can we do some co-enrollment to have students come through us that aren't quite ready for K-State and help prepare them. What can we do related to make it easier for some of our students in key programs that connect to K-State programs and connect to area workforce needs to transfer without losing a lot of credit because they went to a tech college. By the way, we have the same accreditation they do. We've also discussed, I've had their deans on our campus to look at some of our courses and labs, and frankly, they're blown away because we're hands-on from day one. So we're exploring where some of their students need parts of our courses to get that experience actually doing things. In the future, could that change into an affiliation? It might. What we're looking for more right now at our level is collaboration to promote economic development.
So with your institution, what gen ed courses are you teaching? Is that a part of that co-enrollment preparation? Is it gen ed courses through Manhattan Tech as opposed to K-State?
Our gen ed, we do offer at the area high schools. They're connected to our programs as part of our gen ed requirement if you're going to get an Associate of Applied Science degree. They're all part of the K-State, or the state matrix. We don't go beyond that mission creep offering things. We don't offer anything in phys ed or fine arts. So while we're limited, but we're helping a lot of students finish 15 to 18 to 21 hours of gen ed that will transfer. It saves the students money. Without giving away names, we have a lot of children of K-State employees that will take some of our gen ed, smaller class size and less cost. I'm happy to report, and it's the case with many of our tech colleges, we don't do developmental classes. Our courses in math, English, even in science, have a mandatory lab unless you're earning at least a B in the class. We invest more time in helping the students learn the material and master it.
Could you share with us the ratio of high school students and high school graduates, so non-high school students that are attending the tech colleges overall?
It somewhat varies, so I'm going to make a bit of a guess. In my case, in my institution, the number of high school students is stronger. We're at about 48% of our enrollment are high school students, and 52% that aren't. Some of the other institutions, it's different. I'm going to give you a guess overall, and then when I have a chance to dive back in the data book, I'll get the answer to you. I would guess for most of us, we have 55 to 60% at least in tech ed, 35, 40% in gen ed.
As far as being high school students?
Right.
Can you give that to us again? 50, you said 55?
55, 60, it's probably higher, it's probably closer to 65% are in tech ed, 30 to 35% in gen ed.
And of those, how many do you feel are attending the course, taking the course at the technical school as opposed to the high school? Would that be all of the tech ed or most of the tech ed?
Again, it's going to vary depending upon the school districts we're working with and what they have for facilities. In my case, it's about 50-50 because Manhattan High School has more facility space and has some tech ed in place. I can't say that's the case with all of us. I'll find the data and get it to you.
I think that we would like to see that data. And we'd like to see that data for the tech ed as well as for the gen ed.
Will do.
Yes, Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just looking at the head count data, and this, I guess it kind of goes along with what the chairman was asking. I noticed that under the head count data and the full-time equivalency data, the full-time equivalency really hasn't changed very much, but the head count data has. And
Excel and CTE.
so it's a contributor to the high school?
For the most part, it's because
What you said about those numbers, I thought, okay, that's.
Yeah, we've increased, all of us have increased engagement with the high schools with Excel and CTE and some gen ed, so we have many more part-time students because of that. Yep.
With regard to the Promise Scholarship, are you saying the enrollment is as well predominantly healthcare, or are you seeing it be in other areas with regard to those that are utilizing the Promise Scholarship?
I'm going to make a guess. I don't know, and I'll have to find out from my colleagues. In our particular case, our financial aid people do a good job of trying to match up students in all the qualifying programs to the Promise Act. So I wouldn't say healthcare is necessarily always the majority. She is looking at who has the need, who's in the qualifying program, who's going to meet the criteria.
And they are being able to use, they're using the Promise Scholarship first semester, they're not waiting.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions?
These are good questions. I'm going to do my homework.
I'm not seeing any more, so again, I want to thank you very much for testifying with us today.
Thank you. Please reach out if there's other information you need.
Okay. If you can get that back, like within the next week, then we'll make sure that Cindy gets that to
Will
the
do.
committee.
Try to have it to you by Monday. Thank you.
Okay. I am not seeing the folks from the Midwest Higher Education Compact. I think they're over testifying with the House Committee. Still with the House. I think we will stand at ease for a few moments, and while we're waiting to see if they can make it over here, a couple of things. So we did receive the Kansas Education Systems Accreditation report that came from the Kansas Department of Education. So that is that accreditation process for all of our school districts. The other thing that I want to remind you of is tomorrow, we will not be meeting in this room. We're going to be meeting in the old Supreme Court room, 346 South. We will be joining with the House Education Committee And we're going to have those teachers of the year finalists are going to be making their presentations. We did ask them, rather than reading their essays to us, we provided them with 2 prompts. One was share with us an example of an innovation you've used in the classroom and how you implemented it and what was that result. And the other is share with us what advice you would have, would give to a high school student who's considering teaching as a profession. I did receive some preliminary information, still wanting a little bit more, waiting to hear from our private not-for-profit colleges and universities, but did get some preliminary information through KBOR and the Department of Research, so thank you very much, JG, on that. I will have it by next week to share with all of you, and it shows a 10-year, over a 10-year span, what enrollment has been in education, for education degrees, elementary ed and secondary ed. And though we've been told that enrollment is down, 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 I can say that Wichita State is one example where it's up, up. And so we are starting to see some changes and trends with that. Now, the interesting thing is Wichita State is the university that in overall enrollment, so all enrollment, not just focused on education students, they're up as well this year compared to the other Regents institutions. I think that you've probably seen in the media that the deans of our Regents institutions have gotten together, the deans of education have gotten together, and they've just realized, I guess, that enrollment has been down, even though for some of it, you can see it's been a trend for 10 years. And so they have some proposals that they're wanting legislature to respond to. Some of it is primarily funding, but one of their proposals is that apprenticeship, as opposed to seeking a degree in elementary education or secondary education, but to enter into an apprenticeship with the school district. And yet the Department of Education hasn't really explored that at this point yet, as far as licensure. We are going to have a presentation next week to go through the licensure that the Department of Ed is giving. So I did see, hello there. I see that we do have Rob Trambath. He's the Chief Operating Officer and General Counsel for the Midwestern Higher Education Compact. Is Susan on her way, or is she still testifying? Okay. Are you giving any testimony, or you're here as support? Okay. Well, since you are quite familiar with MHEC, Midwestern Higher Education Compact, we have some new members to our committee, but if you wouldn't mind coming up and just starting with a little bit of background of how did MHEC get started, and what are some of the things, what are some of the reasons that Kansas as a state is a participant?
Oh, thank you. We did have some slides presented. I don't know if you all were able to get those or not, but I'm going a little,
Yep.
I'll go a little off script since, as you can tell, I'm not Susan Heegard, our president. So I will provide you a little background of the compact. We are a legislatively created compact that really originated through the Council of State Governments Midwest. We were the only region in the country that didn't have a higher education compact at the time. This was 1991. And they thought it would be very good for the states to get together and create their own compact here in the Midwest. So we are the 12 Midwestern states. It's kind of the Midwest Census region. That we mirror that exact footprint. Like I said, we're one of 4 regional higher education compacts in the country. There is the one in the West, one in the South, and one in New England. There's actually 3 states that don't belong to the compact. That's New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Apparently, they don't think they need to belong, although they do dabble in some of all of our programs. So even though they don't want to be members, they do take advantage of some of the services and offerings that we have. Each state becomes a member of the compact by signing into or entering into statute the same compact language. So Kansas, I think, is one of our original members of the compact. They joined in 1990, even before the compact was formed. You needed 5, I think, states to sign on in order to become a compact, and Kansas was one of the very first ones. It's a state commitment, so the states are the actual member. The state pays $115,000 in state commitment to be a member, and then every entity in the state, every higher education entity, and depending upon the program, even our K-12, are able to take advantage of the programs and services that we offer. We are governed by 60 commissioners, from 5 from each state plus alternates, and in Kansas, I think if you go to the next, yes. Representative Barbara Ballard will actually be our vice chair this year, or is the vice chair this year, will be the chair next year. And of course, Senator Baumgartner is also on the commission. There are actually the 5 commissioners are the governor, the governor's designee, 2 legislators, 1 from each chamber, and then 2 at large, generally appointed by the governor. So the 2 legislators there, and then Dr. Blake Flanders is also appointed by the governor along with Dr. Lane, and then Mr. Arenado is the governor's designee. And then Kansas has 2 alternates that they also appoint from the legislature, and that would be Senator Marcy Francisco and Representative Ken Rajes. So what are the value, or what are the services that we do provide to Kansas and the other states of the compact? Well, we like to think of ourselves as 2 sides of the aisle. There is the contracts and cost savings programs, and then there's the policy and research. Now, it's not a clear line, they overlap, but Kansas participates in a lot of both the cost savings and the policy and research. On the cost savings side, we have technology contracts that save the entities a lot of time and money to purchase their technology-related goods. There's student health insurance. Kansas is, the KBOR institutions are participating in that. We also had a master property insurance program that Kansas participated in for a long time. The market, the whole industry is changing, and we're changing our program. So Kansas currently doesn't participate in that program. And then on the policy side, Kansas is very active in things like dual enrollment, open education resources, and our credential transparency, where we help to map the state's credentials to make it more transparent and clear what credentials lead to what degree, or what professions and what jobs, and help students and as well as employers make sure they align and those kind of credentials to get what the skills and training that they need. And then we also offer research. We regular reports on data and trends, and as well as an interactive dashboard where you can kind of create your own analysis. And I'll touch on that a little bit later in the presentation. And I do have some slides that give you an idea of some of the data and research that we do. And finally, we bring together legislative, executive branch, as well as higher education leaders in a convening. Sometimes it's just hard to get people together in a room, and and particularly when it's across 12 states. And you get to hear different perspectives and ideas about what other states are doing about issues that you share. If you go to the next slide, yes. This is a little bit about the cost savings. I talked about the Kansas pays $115,000 to be a member of the compact. We believe that we estimate that there's a 30-fold return on its annual compact membership commitment. They saved colleges and universities and school districts and local governments realized more than $3.48 million in cost savings through our contracts and programs. So that's about a 30-fold return on that $115,000. Most of our programs are tailored towards higher education. We're very higher education focused, but in the case of our technology contracts, they're also made available to K-12 and local units of government. So we have listing of each year of the entities that purchase, and you'll see not only Kansas State University, but School District 15 or Firehouse, 12 or something like that, are all can take advantage of our contracts. We also have a student exchange program, and Kansas citizens saved over $2 million through their participation in that student exchange program. And just as I finish that up, yeah. We recently completed our strategic plan, which I know Senator Baumgartner was very involved with, we identified the priorities, innovation, efficiency, and effectiveness, developing collaborative solutions to regional problems, and driving cost savings and business solutions. We think that the compact is uniquely situated to serve as an incubator to providing a platform to discuss opportunities and pilot potential solutions. We also are able to take on projects that are maybe too big for one state to try to do on their own. And we also, like I identified earlier with our cost savings programs, we're able to, through our potential volume of the region, drive down costs and protect our investments in higher education by reducing risk. This would be a good time. I'm switching over to the slides. Okay.
Jump forward or? I think Rob's got this. Okay.
All right, so we'll look at some of the data slides here. The first one is we start broadly with attainment. And for those of you that aren't familiar with attainment, that's some kind of measurable degree or certificate or training or learning above high school. And Kansas currently sits at 55% have some type of post-secondary certificate or higher, compared to nationally 52%. So Kansas is doing better than nationally, but even by Kansas' own admissions, that isn't enough. There still need to move more. And so if you look at the next slide, it kind of breaks down that data even further. You can see that 8% have less than a high school diploma, and then 24% have a high school diploma or equivalent. And 13% have some college and no credential. And that's kind of a key category, because those people probably have enough training or education to get some kind of credential, or if not, they're very close to getting it. It wouldn't take a significant investment to get them back in. And then, 4% have industry certifications, and 6% have college certificates. And then the traditional higher education follows after that: 10% associate degree, 23% a bachelor's degree, and 12% have a graduate degree. And in an economy, it requires all kinds of these kind of education. You need both the tech people with the certificates and above, and also the postdocs. So it's very important that the economy has, or the state has all these different things, and that's why it's important to keep working on the attainment level. So then a little more detail on the data, and we'll focus on some of the demographics. There is a gap in the proportion of adults with associate degree between underrepresented minority students and white students. And this slide just kind of demonstrates that, and it kind of gives you an idea that with the need for more people with more credentials, it's important to identify where there are areas where you can show and get improvement. And that's why some of these demographic slides help. The next slide shows that although there's a decline in population, the minority high school, the decline in high school graduates, the majority of the white high school graduates are in decline, whereas the underrepresented minority graduates kind of remain fairly stable. That's actually a little different in other states, where they are seeing that there is a decline in white, but the underrepresented minority are actually increasing. In Kansas, they're kind of maintaining. But again, it shows that there are going to be fewer white high school graduates in the future, and more underrepresented minority. And again, it goes to how we look at where we need to focus some of our work on in getting attainment. The next slide kind of shows that there's been an overall decline in higher education attendance, particularly over the last decade, but really during this COVID pandemic. There's already a decline occurring, but exacerbated during the COVID. As most of you probably are aware, usually during a recession, community colleges show an increase but not now. And I think we're all kind of looking to see whether this is an ongoing trend or if this is something, just a blip in what historically happens. I think the next slide, next 4 or 5 slides, we'll talk about total price of attendance. So if you look at Kansas public 2-year colleges, they're lower, for tuition fees, room and board. The Kansas 2-year colleges are lower than the national and Midwest average, but higher than the price in most border states. If you look at the next slide, we'll look at the 4-year institutions. The price of attendance at Kansas public 4-year institutions is lower than the Midwest and national averages, and also lower than most of its border states. So then if you look at the next slide, the average state grant aid. So, states like in Minnesota, we're a high tuition, high aid state, and other states just approach it as a lower tuition, low aid. So there are different ways to go about it. Here in Kansas, the average state grant aid for a full-time student at public 2-year colleges was lower in Kansas than its border states and lower than the Midwest and national average. I should put a large caveat on that, though, that this was before the Promise Act scholarship, which is really going to probably change this data significantly, but because of the data lag, that wasn't included in this slide. So next year at this time, when you probably see it, this slide will look much different. And the next slide then shows that the state grant aid at full-time, for full-time students at public 4-year institutions, which is lower in Kansas and its border states and lower than the Midwest and national average. And then I think if you look at the next slide, it kind of brings these two together. It's the average net price, the total cost of attendance, including room and board, minus the grant aid for students across income categories at Kansas public 2-year institutions are above the Midwest and national average and higher than the price in the border states. But again, because of this is the data lag, the Promise scholarship won't come into effect yet. So this will look very different, I think, next year when we look at these kind of slides. If you go to the next slide, it does the same thing, the net price for public 4-year institutions, and they are above the Midwest and national average and higher than the price in their border states. But it's not a significant difference there. So the next 5 slides then cover student migration and compare Kansas to its border states. The outmigration of first-time students increased slightly between 2018 and 2020, but decreased in most border states. So there is some outmigration, but if you look at the next slide, it shows you that a significant number of first-time students migrate into Kansas from borders and in border states, even though it decreased slightly between 2018 and 2020. And then the following slide kind of puts those two together, and it shows that more students migrate into Kansas than the number that migrate out, and that's kind of where you want to be. If you look at a state like Illinois, for example, they have a significant out-migration, so you don't necessarily want to be in that position. Kansas is doing a good job of bringing in more students than they lose out. And then finally, the last slide, it's quite busy, but I think it's an interesting slide. 83% of Kansas first-time students stay in state compared to 9% who attend an out-of-state college, and 8% of Kansas residents who attend an out-of-state and out of the Midwest. So those that go to go to Arizona or something, want to go to the beaches. But so the majority of students stay in Kansas, and then those that go out, most of them stay in the Midwest anyway. So, and that kind of is a look at most of the Midwest. But again, if you look at like Illinois, they're the ones that have a significant number of students leaving their state. So I kind of went through those fairly quickly. I apologize. I don't know if there's anything else I needed to add, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Could you just go back to that slide that showed that the out-migration was less than the in-migration of college students? So I think that's the one. Okay, and that's the in-migration. So when we compare it.
Next slide after this one. Yeah.
I think when you look at it compared to Colorado, Missouri, and Nebraska, it's very interesting. I don't think that we've really seen that data before. Okay.
And the last slide kind of compares it to all the Midwest.
Yep.
A little busy to read, but it does kind of show the same thing.
Okay. Thank you very much. Committee, any other questions? Senator Petty, and then Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the presentation. I'm trying to remember which slide it was, but on the attainment level, I wondered if there's a model for what's considered a model to reach for when it comes to attainment level.
You know what their goal is? This is where I will ask a little help.
I guess it was slide 8.
And if you don't mind, if you would just introduce yourself for those that are listening and also for the record.
Madam Chair and members, my name is Susan Heegard, and I'm the president of the Midwestern Higher Education Compact, or MEC, and we're very happy to be here. He did a good job. So with respect to attainment, I want to just understand, Senator Petty, your question, when you're saying a model, when you're looking at slide 7 or slide 8, I'm guessing, the goal nationally that the Lumina Foundation has kind of focused on, they're really the leader nationally in kind of figuring out, identifying the importance of an attainment level for your state. And every state's different. You know, Mississippi will look very different than New York. So the models would vary, but they say about 60% of your population, that's the minimum goal, is to have some credential beyond high school. So are you saying like, should it be, the focus should be on a particular part of the attainment, span there? Like, is it, 2-year, 4-year? I'm not sure if I understand.
Well, you kind of answered, you answered part of the question right there when you said 60%. I was just curious if there was as in that case, if there was a model for where we should be looking at that there, well, I suspect that, a positive model would have that 8% getting less and less, so that less than a high school diploma. So where in the mix does it fit into success ratio for employment readiness within your state? Or
So, Madam Chair, Senator Petty, I think one example that I've come across is Indiana. So they had a campaign called You Can Go Back. So what they did is yes, the 8% is a really important thing to focus on, as is the 24. But the 13 it's much bigger in Indiana. They had a number of people that with some college but no credential. So they went back and found those folks. Tried to, as many as they could, and then figured out, all right, what are the employer needs in the state, and then what do we need to get you whatever it is that you think you need. So in some cases, people had very little college, and so getting a certification in particular, skill, like plumber, something like that was what was needed. In other cases, maybe they had 3 years of college, but they could easily go back and get credit for an AA degree, and then figure out what their focus would be. So that would be one example. I think another state that we were in recently, Ohio, they attracted, was it Intel? They attracted Intel to come to Ohio, and they have actually aligned their, that's their choice, but they've aligned their 2- and 4-year institutions with the needs and there's a lot of training and cross-pollination that goes on there. So I think you got to look at the needs of the state, and then figure out, pull your chamber together, with, other entities that are responsible for training and education, and then figure out where you want to go.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Rob, you did do a great job on page 11 of the PowerPoint. It shows the undergraduate enrollment declining at 2-year and 4-year institutions. and these are just Kansas numbers, does that same rate of decline hold true for other Midwestern institutions? And also, is there a direct correlation between declining enrollment and increasing tuition?
So, Madam Chair and Senator Straub, answer to your first question, we used to include a map, and we could probably pull that together for you. So in the past, like if there was a recession, you'd see two-year college enrollment tick up, really, no matter what. I mean, it was just kind of across the board. But that's not happening, and it's not all attributed to COVID. So folks are trying to figure out, why the heck is this happening? And there are a lot of very smart people trying to dig in and figure out what's happening. What's the behavior piece of this? Are they getting a good job and making so much money it doesn't matter? So the two-year enrollment, that would normally tick up, and we're seeing it tick down, and that's really interesting. And the four-year enrollment, I would say my understanding is that's tied more to demographic changes. To your second question, I don't feel like I'm in the right place to answer. It's directly tied to tuition and things, but I would say that when you're looking at affordability, people do make choices, and there's sort of the sticker price people talk about, right? And then there's the net price, and the net price is what happens when there's, grant aid and other things that allow that price to be lowered for the student. So I think one of the good things that's happening now is that the net price is being talked about, so people have a better understanding of what it's actually going to cost somebody. Because a lot of times that sticker price, is causes a lot, like an airline ticket, right? It's really scary, and causes a lot of people to say, I'm not going to go there. So, but I can't tell you that there's a direct connection between these two things.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there a possibility that you have that information that you could compare the two and provide us with that information later, or send it to the committee assistant?
Madam Chair and Senator Straub, I could try to see if our research folks, I know that there's probably data that we could provide, whether there's direct connection, but you may be able to look at one pile of data and look at another and draw some conclusions from that. I think that, we have seen tuition increase, in some cases, in some states and institutions across the country. And for some people, it doesn't affect them at all. And for others, they're very price sensitive. So we could certainly try to pull that together for you.
One last question from Senator Petty.
Thank you. And this is on slide 10. And I guess I kind of grapple with this slide and wonder why. I mean, we have population changes going on. I'm just trying to understand the significance of this slide.
So, Madam Chair and Senator Petty, part of, I think, why I felt that this was important, you can blame me for this, is that I always think it's important to look at data and figure out what the shifts are happening. So this slide would be broadly what's happening with overall population, changes in your state. And then there are other slides that kind of dig more, that we haven't presented here, but you can dig more into those details. But what's interesting, I think if you went to Texas, it would look really different. So it tells you that your overall population is slowly ticking down, or is predicted to tick down. That's the prediction. And then inside of that total population, your white population is ticking down more quickly. And then your underrepresented or your minority population is staying pretty stable. So in most of the other states that I'm in, that population's increasing a little bit more than here. But it still means, that the prediction, and this comes from our friends in the Western Compact, this data, the prediction, is that inside that population, there's change occurring in your state.
Okay, thank you.
And then you can draw your own conclusions about what that means and whether whether it requires action or not. It's just information.
Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate that you spent time over with the House. We try and make it even, Stephen, that never works.
No.
But we are just so glad that you were able to be here since you were visiting here, and you're headed off again tomorrow to which state are you going?
Tomorrow we go home, Madam Chair, but then next week we are in South Dakota, and then the week after that in Missouri. Then Minnesota, where we live, Wisconsin, and then Illinois.
So safe
Well,
travels.
thank you for being a commissioner and for your engagement, and thank you all for allowing us to speak with you today, and we'll follow up with you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, committee. We are adjourned.